Welcome to FUNC YOU UP, the podcast that gives you the best of functional medicine, nutrition, and wellness in 8 minutes or less.
Hello, everyone. This is Michelle Miller, clinical nutritionist.
Hi, this is Diana Orchant, functional medicine registered dietitian-to.
Welcome back to FUNC YOU UP. We have a great episode today. Diana, start us out with what you were just sharing with me about forming habits.
So according to one of our favorite books, Atomic Habits, it takes about 8 weeks to form a habit. So we are now, week 6 into quarantine, and we are less than 2 weeks away from potentially having formed maybe some desirable, but likely a good amount of undesirable.
Yes.
Habits.
So, right. Habits can be good habits. They can be bad habits. But, when you find yourself having some repetitive behaviors in your life, you should start to watch them closely because those will soon turn into habits. So yeah, that's a great point. There's certainly some things I need to check in with and kind of rearrange so that they don't become habits. It's interesting too, this idea of emotional eating, I think, has come up with a lot of our clients. There is a lot of stress right now. There's a lot of emotions right now. There's not a lot of, it feels like we're trapped in a way that we have less outlets. And so we thought, what better time to discuss with our audience some of the different strategies and the ways that we approach food, and especially when it comes to emotional eating during this time of quarantine.
And we've developed 4 main kind of tips, ideas to kind of keep you grounded and get in touch with your emotions and your feelings and different things that might be going on in your head or in your environment that might be triggering you to emotional eat.
Absolutely. So let's start out with the very first one, which is all about really first checking in with yourself. Diana, kind of start me out with this one.
So checking in with yourself really means just kind of anytime you might feel like you want to emotionally eat, maybe you want to dig into those cookies on the counter. We've all been there, but getting in touch with yourself. So thinking, what do I really want right now? So taking a moment to pause and figure out what it is you actually want. And maybe it's food. Great. Maybe you're actually hungry. But chances are you might not be, especially if it's that, 4 p.m. time of day, and you just had lunch recently. And so kind of looking into yourself and figuring out, what do I want?
I love, you said earlier, this idea of, are you being driven by your mind? Are you being driven by your stomach? Are you genuinely hungry? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Kind of just checking in with, what is that trigger feeling? Is it boredom? Is it stress? Is it fatigue? Whatever it may be. And I think of this exercise, this moment of checking in with yourself, kind of pausing for a second. It seems so simple. And even if you decide, to make a quote unquote bad decision, just the practice of pausing is so profound because it gives you half a chance of making a better decision and actually giving your body truly something that could be productive with those emotions. So realizing what it is that I'm doing right now, and then being able to take action to potentially change what you're doing and figuring out what other options could work just as well.
Right. And step 1, you're really already halfway there if you can take a step back and even pause and ask yourself what you really want. That's a huge win right there if you're able to kind of stop in the moment in your tracks and figure out what you're actually kind of craving.
So let's say it's been a long, hard day. You get home, you grab the ice cream from the freezer, and just knowing going into that ice cream, just being aware because you have taken that time to pause and check in with yourself, touch base with your emotions, that you are going for that ice cream because you are stressed, sad, you name the emotion. Just knowing that was a trigger will really help you with our second strategy. So Diana, kind of lead us into the next one.
So our next one is about rewiring your brain.
This is my favorite.
So when you feel like you're going to emotionally eat, kind of resorting to a list of healthier options. Maybe they're in your mind, maybe you write them down in advance. They could be calling a friend, or Michelle's favorite, having a little dance party.
Singing, however you emote, right? Having like a crazy dance party by yourself where nobody's watching, or, I love like going on a drive and just like belting out at the top of my lungs some old school from my child, old song from my childhood. But like, it's really, at the end of the day, it's just something else that's going to be producing these feel good hormones, these feel good neurotransmitters, just as that, ice cream from the freezer would feel.
Right. And as we were talking earlier about forming habits, I think it really comes into play with this idea of rewiring your brain. So I'll break it down for you really quickly, but essentially the process of building a habit can be divided into 4 very simple steps, which is the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. And if any of you guys have read the Atomic Habits book, you'll recognize these 4 main ideas, these 4 main steps. So the cue then triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies the craving and ultimately becomes associated with that cue. So our brains are constantly being trained in this way.
So I'm stressed out. I want ice cream. I have the ice cream, which, gives me this rush of dopamine. And now I feel better from being stressed. And when you do that over and over and over again, you are creating a habit. You are creating this neural pathway that then says, I know what to do when I'm stressed. I eat ice cream. Now, we know you're sitting here and you're thinking, look, ice cream is a well-studied response to stress. But it's this idea that, we'll have people say like, okay, yeah, journaling sounds adorable, you two, but I know that if I, go for that glass of wine, or I go for that bag of chips, or I go for that banana bread, whatever it may be, that's going to work. Well, it 100% is going to work, but that's because you've taken the time to develop a habit. And you've taken the time to develop that feedback loop, this cue, craving, response, reward pathway. If you take, you spent your whole life developing that pathway. If you take 8 weeks to develop a new one, think how long that could serve you moving into the rest of your life.
And you're really just changing that response, which I'm saying it's so easy. It's not easy. We're not sitting
Absolutely.
here saying, you just change that response. Very easy, throw out the ice cream. No, it's more just understanding, right? As we said earlier, it's step 1 is being halfway there, is really like taking a step back and realizing it. So if that cue stays the same, you're bored, you're angry, you're tired, you had a long day, you're stressed, the craving still remains to quell this emotion, but the response could be dancing, calling your best friend, opening your journal and reflecting, going for a walk in nature, sitting outside and getting some sun on your face. Any of those items could step in as that new response. Or maybe food does play a role. Maybe you're not fully there yet and food still needs to play a role. Well, we can figure out some healthier options, which we'll dive into. But that reward of those dopamine receptors hitting your brain would still be there. The trigger,
Yes.
the response would just be different. And
Yes.
that's kind of breaking that down to understand that.
100%. We're still looking for the end point of getting that dopamine response. It's just, we're going to get there a little bit different. We're going to utilize some different tools to get that response that, the ice cream, the chips, the cookies, the wine used to give us. Okay. So then we do think it's important to talk about nutrient status, because we're spewing out this idea of like neurotransmitters and dopamine, and there's other feel good, neurotransmitters too, things like GABA and serotonin, which is a really popular one, neuroepinephrine, other feel good hormones that kind of like give us a boost and give us a good jolt of feel good energy. But you're not able to properly produce those neurotransmitters, these feel good hormones, if you're lacking certain key ingredients, key nutrients, This especially is going to go into things like amino acids, which are what proteins are broken down into, or what make up proteins rather. Certain vitamins like vitamin C, all of our different B vitamins, and a lot of our minerals are going to be a part of how we can even make these good neurotransmitters.
So if you're lacking these vitamins and minerals, then you're not going to be able to make these. But it's also kind of this vicious cycle almost. If we're stressed and anxious right now, then stress is going to drain the body of these critical nutrients. So an easy way to think of this is that if you're stressed, stress drains your B vitamins, and you're not going to be able to make these neurotransmitters. And so how do we make sure that we're getting enough of these vitamins? Well, first of all, it's really looking into your diet, figuring out your lifestyle. Are you super stressed all the time? Maybe calming some of that stress. Maybe it's your genetic makeup makes it harder for you to kind of assimilate some of these vitamins and minerals. But the biggest thing would be probably to do some testing.
Yeah, find out, if you are someone that, has been, perpetually low in certain key vitamins or minerals. It's still shocking to me when we go through blood work for patients that like they've been living their whole life with like low folate levels or low iron levels or low magnesium levels. Like these are key nutrients. It's like not having water. Like your body cannot function the way it needs to unless you have these. Now, right now I understand, like in this very acute time in history, you might not be able to get your blood work done. Fine. It is very safe for just about anybody to take a good quality B complex vitamin. So I'm not so much worried about that, at this very moment in time. But I think once we're able to get out of our house, everyone should be getting their blood work tested at least twice a year, because your diet changes are going to alter nutritional makeup and how your biochemistry is rebalancing. And so it's such a shame when I see people like depending on willpower and trying so hard, and then I find out they didn't even have like the fuel in their system to make these processes work the way they could have. I also, Diana, do you mind going into gut health? Because you mentioned this earlier before we started recording. I thought it was a really good point about just the role of that good gut bacteria.
Yeah, so our good gut bacteria are our probiotics, or the prebiotics that allow the probiotics to flourish, are also going to have a huge effect just because of the gut brain axis, right? Like our gut and our brains are so closely tied, which is why when you're anxious or stressed, maybe you run to the bathroom. That there's a real correlation there, and so making sure you have optimal gut bacteria, whether that's just taking a probiotic every day or doing a stool test, which is our favorite because we can actually figure out what's going on down there, what you might be missing, if you have some pathogenic bacteria growing, anything like that. That's really going to affect these neurotransmitters as well, and kind of how your energy levels, how you function every day, how you feel. Being depressed, anxious, the exception of kind of what's going on in the world, there's there's usually some sort of root cause to that we can figure out that's going on internally. It's not necessarily something that can't be controlled or can't be figured out.
Absolutely. So, yes, it's great to use these strategies, but do yourself a favor and just make sure you're covering all your bases, and that, you're getting your blood work checked, you're taking nutrients, whether that's a good quality multivitamin or a B complex. But, I think a lot of people really get down on themselves, like I must be lazy or I must not have enough willpower, when no, you just lacked some real fuel in your system that you needed to function properly. So I'm glad we touched on that point. And then Diana, take us through this last step, or this last kind of like key strategy we use.
So step 4 is have a food game plan in mind. So that could be there's a variety of kind of facets that fall into this, but the first one is having healthy foods on hand. So whether that just being stocking your fridge with as many whole foods, or we said in our last episode, maybe some frozen foods if you can't get a hold of some of the more fresh foods right now. But thinking, quick and easy snacks that you can get a hold of, whether it be half an avocado, or guacamole with vegetables, fruit with nut butter, making your own veggie chips, or even purchasing some veggie chips if you need some that crunch. And yeah, I think that's kind of like thinking of foods ahead of time.
Yes. I get a bit into the tough love mode when we talk about this, because I feel so passionate about whatever you bring into your house, you are intending to eat. I have never met someone that buys food and brings it into their house that did not intend to eat it. So don't fool yourself. Subconsciously, deep down inside, you know what you're bringing in is to be consumed by you. So I think set yourself up for success. Bring in good, nutrient dense foods that are actually going to fill you up. You know, something that we talk about a lot with our clients is this idea that, someone eats a meal and then still feels unsatisfied or still feels hungry. It's like, well, what made up that meal? Did you have enough good, healthy fats? Did you have enough quality protein, whether it be plant protein or animal protein? You know, was there enough fiber in that meal? Are you dehydrated? Make sure you're really setting yourself up for success, that you can be satisfied by your food.
Absolutely. And another thing is just kind of, whether it's a snack or a meal, sitting down with a plated portion of that snack or meal. Basically, avoid eating anything out of a bag. Avoid eating anything on a countertop. Really sit down at a table and plate those foods. A lot of people, when we hear that people are binging or eating too much, you're never hearing that people are binging on a bag of carrots or on apples or avocados. What you're hearing is that people are binging on chips and cookies and ice cream and all these foods that have these addictive properties. And again, I think we have like somewhat of a different view of that. We don't even sit here and say, well, why'd you do that? These foods are designed to be overconsumed. And if you listen to episode 30 on Bliss Point, they're engineered that way so that you're supposed to eat a whole bag of chips. No one can just stop after a handful. You always kind of want to go back. That requires willpower. Or I don't even think willpower necessarily is a key factor here.
It's so true. I remember talking with a client and taking her through these steps, and she goes, sometimes after a long, hard day, the kids are in bed, I finally have moments to myself, no one's bothering me. She's like, I go into a trance and I just start like, I have a bag of popcorn and she's like, I almost like black out. And like next thing I know, like half the bag is gone of this like family size, bag of popcorn. She's like, I don't even remember like what it tasted like. I just couldn't stop. And she was really beating herself up about it and trying to use the like, cue craving reward, response reward pathway. And I was like, well, yes, but that food has been engineered for you to feel a certain way and for you to not be able to stop. So have some grace with yourself that this isn't just willpower, like you said, Diana. And, there is something happening that is like, we're kind of up against something that's being engineered to work against our natural cues. So yes, I think being aware that, potentially going into that popcorn experience and putting it into a bowl could be helpful, but understanding that that food has been manipulated so that you can't stop and so that you don't feel satisfied until you basically feel sick because you've had so much of it.
So true.
And you said that was episode 30, right? That Bliss Point? Awesome.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite episodes. Well, I do want to say also, last but not least, this idea of having a food game plan. Some people are the type where, they're going to rip the Band-Aid off and they're just going to like throw out all the processed food in their house and they're going to switch to just having like a fruit or vegetable for a snack. And that's fantastic. But there's also people that is just too far of a change to make overnight. So we're here to say it's okay. And we always use this term of like a 1 degree of change. So if you're someone that's, your go-to snack food is Cheez-Its, maybe you just find a slightly healthier version of Cheez-Its. Like there's some great options. Simple Mills makes a nice one. Like there's other companies out there that make these products. You're just looking for a slightly healthier version. That is still a great step in your health journey. And it's not to say you have to go from Doritos to, a handful of almonds. We can find some middle ground where you're still making improvements and working away from some of that manufactured, engineered kind of like more inflammatory fake food, and at least getting to a point where you could feel more satisfied from what you're eating. So thank you for joining us. Just to kind of summarize the steps, Diana, kind of take me through the key points just so that we can drive this home for everybody.
So the key points are to first check in with yourself, right? So know that our minds are in our heads, not in our stomachs. So take a step back and think. Step 2, rewire your brain. So going to that cue, craving, response, reward pathway that we discussed and kind of changing that response over time. Number 3 is checking your nutrient status. So come in to get testing, look into your nutrient, your vitamin, your mineral levels to figure out, making sure that you are actually making those feel-good neurotransmitters. And number 4 is have a food game plan. So plan ahead, have good snacks on hand, and figure out what works for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We hope this is helpful for you during this time. Again, we can't state it enough, like, have some grace with yourself, give yourself some credit. We're all in this together. This is not an easy time. These are unprecedented times for sure. But we really just want to make sure, as we always talk about on our episodes, we want to come out of this pandemic a healthier version of ourselves and be able to say that we used this time wisely and that we were able to get a little bit healthier, improve our health in a small amount, or improve one habit during this time if we can. I certainly know I'm going to take a good look at some of the habits I've been forming without realizing it over the last 6 weeks and shift those very quickly. So thank you for your time. If you have questions, where can they get in touch with us?
So you can reach out to us on our Instagram at Physio Logic NYC, or email us at funcyouyoup@physiologicnyc.com.
And always continue to share our episodes. Please leave us a review if you find this material to be helpful. And if you want to follow more of our posts, you can follow me at MichelleMiller_MSACN on Instagram. Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.
You've been listening to Funk You Up. Be sure to like, review, and subscribe for more daily tips on living well.